So I'd gotten out of the military, bounced around. I worked at a car dealership, set a record for most cars sold. I mean, did all kinds of things, man. I've always been good at anything I do. But I bounced around over the next couple years in a couple different jobs, and then started my own business from scratch. All the while, having that relationship with my mom, cutting her off because she was so extremely toxic, but then always coming back to her within a couple months because of my extreme shame and guilt in the programming, abusive programming and trauma that she had put on me. Three years into starting my own business, my wife had another child. When my daughter was born, my wife went into severe postpartum depression. It was so bad I couldn't leave either one of my kids anywhere around her at all because she was going to kill them. I did that for a year. My kids went everywhere with me. I watched them while I was still living there, hoping she would get over her postpartum depression, but she didn't. So I finally realized, I had to make a change, and I moved. I took my kids with me and I moved back down to Front Royal, my hometown. But when I lost that marriage, I lost everything that I ever held dear, because I had always said, I would never get divorced. I would never put my kids through having to lose a parent and going through a divorce and all that. Again, all religious based. Completely religious based, mind control, the programming. So when I did finally leave, it put me into an unbelievable depression. The type of depression because I was living off the residuals of my business. So I had 50,000 books listed online that I had individually listed. So now what I was doing was I was just selling them. I wasn't listing anymore. I wasn't doing anything. I was just basically fulfilling orders. I was an order filler in my business, and I was living off that comfortably. I mean, I made six figures my first year doing my business. So I was able to, when I came down here, slide into a deep depression, where I would wake up in the morning and immediately get so fucking drunk I would pass out by noon, and then wake up 2-3 hours later and do the same thing. So I'd get drunk twice in a day, and I did that for 6 months and I had moved a baby. I rented a huge farmhouse down here. I had moved a babysitter in with me to watch my daughter because I was too drunk. I couldn't even take care of my daughter. I mean, I spent time with my daughter, but I was unable to, because of my severe depression, like constantly change diapers and feed her and all that. I couldn't even feed myself. And then of course I had my son too, who I had to, he went to school and stuff, and I was a terrible father. I was an absent father. I was there, but I was extremely depressed. And I mean, like I don't know how I did not kill myself. I don't know how I survived this depression. So after 6 months, my wife had, she had immediately, once I left, started getting better. She had a boyfriend. I paid for her months of housing up there because we had bought that house. So I paid for months of the mortgage on her rent. I left her with everything. I left everything up there for her. So she had everything. She just needed to get better. That's all I wanted. And anyway, so by 6 months later, she had, gotten better to the point where I had gotten worse. And I said, look, can Sammy move back in with you, because I can't do it. So my daughter moved back in with her. And then it was about a year later that my son, I stayed in this drunken state, guys, for a year and a half getting drunk first thing in the morning, passing out by noon, 1 o'clock, waking back up a couple hours later, getting drunk again. And that's what I did for a year and a half. And then that's when I lost my son. When I told you guys I went to my aunt's house, I had exhausted my money, because by then I hadn't worked my business in a year and a half. I was just filling orders, so I wasn't putting any new books up. So I went from making, $6,000 a month, $3,000 a month, to $1,000 a month, to $500 a month, and then obviously $500 a month was not going to be enough to pay all my bills and everything I needed to do. So yeah, all this ties back into, and again, through all of this, I was, on and off talking to my mom still. And then we get back to the story where I went to my aunt's house for $1,200 to pay my rent. And again, they all had written me off as a drug addict, as lazy, as having all these issues. And they sent me away with a check for these are multi-millionaires in a multi-million-dollar home with, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of vehicles and everything you can imagine. And they sent me away with $600, and my grandma told me that I should be working 2 jobs at Burger King or wherever I have to work, and that there's no excuse. And my uncle told me I should be doing what I love to do. And my grandma said there's no reason I shouldn't be happy because life's too short. And my aunt sent me away with a $600 check. And that night I had to give my son back to my abusive ex-wife. And I went homeless for a month until I was able to get on my feet with that $600. And then it was about 9 months later, my son moved back in with me. It wasn't even a year he was with his mom. It was about 9 months. He had moved back in with me. Within a year of that, a year and a half of that, maybe, my son was 14. I think he had just turned 14 at this time. And my ex-wife, we were trading the kids back and forth, and, for visitations and stuff. And one day I picked up my son and brought him home, and he had a letter from my ex-wife, and she basically disowned him. She said, Brandon, you have your life. You and your dad have your life. Me and Sammy have our life, and good luck to you guys. Wish you the best, but, I'm not going to see you anymore, And that was it. That's how she disowned him, and that's how I found out she wasn't going to let me see my daughter anymore. So that started a year and a half of her not allowing me to see my daughter. In that course of time, there were 2 times when I went up there and almost killed her and her boyfriend at the time, because the cops got called because they wouldn't let me see my daughter. And then there was a time when we tricked. She had come down, like a year later, all of a sudden she wanted to see my son again, right? So she had come down she had picked my son up, took him, and they visited for the weekend or whatever, and she came to drop him back off. Well, when she came to drop him back off, it was at my new in-laws that I had just married. And they had tricked my ex-wife into letting Sammy come in to say hi to everybody. They told her that I was not there. Well, when my daughter reached the front door, I opened the front door and I picked my daughter up. And prior to this, my daughter was like a monkey on me. Like, that girl would not let go of me. She hated being away from me. She could not stand it. Well, when I picked her up, she became straight stiff as a board, and she got the most terrified look in her eyes, and I knew what happened to her. I knew she had been severely abused. And so I put her down right away because I knew I was hurting her, and that she was scared to death. And her mom had seen me from the car and came running up on the front porch, my father-in-law's porch. And because I knew what had happened to my daughter, I fucking went off on my ex-wife, and I picked her up and I threw her off the porch and across the lawn. One throw. I didn't hit her. I didn't do anything like that. I picked her up and I threw her because I couldn't believe the abuse that my daughter must have went under to act like that. Needless to say, I didn't see my daughter for another 6 months until I finally had my day in court. And with the day I finally got a year in court, after a year and a half of not seeing my daughter, the judge looked at that woman and he said, if this man comes in here and even complains one time that you're late allowing him to see his daughter, I will throw you straight in jail. Do you understand? And he made that woman say she understood before he let her out of there. So all of you saying that, oh, I shouldn't have been able, I'm a mean mother, all these things about me. The judge looked right at that woman and told her he would throw her straight in jail if she never let me see my daughter again. And guess what? For the past fucking 10 years, I've gotten my daughter every time I fucking wanted to get my goddamn daughter. I'll tell you that. At my daughter's expense, because my ex-wife took it out on my daughter just like my mom took her aggressions out on me. The extent to which my ex-wife abused my daughter, I may never know. I don't know. My daughter is like me. She will not talk about it. She will not say anything about it. In fact, she goes and lives with her mom still to this day because she's so trauma bonded. One other note to point out, right before I got my day, or right after I got my day in court, I can't remember, guys, but we had a family gathering. It was the last family gathering of me and my siblings at my mom's house. I think it was for Thanksgiving. And the subject of my ex-wife keeping my daughter away from me for a year and a half came up. And this was right before my court date, I believe, right before I was able to see my daughter, right before I got justice. We were there for the holiday, and I mean, the whole, me and my brother, his wife, his kids, my sisters, we were all up there. And the subject of my wife keeping my daughter away from me came up. And I was going off. And my mom started defending my ex-wife. And I was like, what? I was like, how are you defending her? She's abusing my daughter. Come to find out, through the whole time my ex-wife was keeping my daughter from me, my mom was working with her to make that happen behind the scenes. On my ex-wife's side, taking her side, illegally keeping my daughter away from me, while my ex-wife was abusing the fuck out of my daughter. Also, my son was being abused. This abuse goes on so deeply, guys. See, I was allowing my son and my daughter to visit my mom, who lived up in Pennsylvania, for like a week during the summertime every summer. Supposedly, my son was telling my mom about the abuse by his mom. And little did he know that my mom was complicit in that as well. This is how deep of a nasty, evil abuser my mom is. My mom was not only complicit and completely responsible for all my abuse, she was complicit and responsible for my son and my daughter's abuse as well. And to this day, she will not admit to any of this. Start another video.